Hello and welcome to Freestyle, where we discuss pop culture, self-help, business, gaming, and technology, among other things. We go off script here. Let's freestyle. Please consider giving us a like and subscribing. It really helps. Now enjoy the show. Hello, I'm Justin with Freestyle, joined by special guest Andreas Metzen and my co-host True Shot Turtle.
Hello. I am excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Andreas Metzen is a freelance consultant. He is residing in Germany currently and has worked for 7 years at the local observatory. He's given a number of lectures to include Our Place in the Universe, SpaceX, Humanity is Becoming a Multiplanetary Species, The Quantum and the Lotus, and Consciousness in the Universe. Mr. Metzen, could you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, talk about myself. So maybe in a nutshell only. I'm a freelance consultant. I worked 14 years in an IT company, half of that as a technical person. So I used to be able to program and administer databases, and the other half was leadership and quality management topics. I spent 7 years in a bank, in a niche bank. It's one of or a subsidiary of one of Germany's largest banks, and they did finances of ships and planes and trains and stuff like that. In a similar role in terms of continuous improvement. I left the bank as senior vice president about 6 years ago and decided to do freelancing. Yeah, which said at the beginning, yes, I had 3 sons, and as you have when you have kids, you try to offer them things, and we offered them to go to the local observatory, which we have here in town. And I ended up teaching, so to say, or you call it giving lectures there after year 2 of having joined the observatory. That's about a nutshell, maybe.
I would say, I'm also in technical field. So, but I have a huge interest in space and the cosmos. So I think that I think you kind of are a seeker of knowledge in a lot of ways. Would you agree with that?
I have what kind of knowledge?
A seeker of knowledge, like you.
Oh, yes,
have an interest in.
I'm curious. Yes, you can say that.
So, what kind of got you interested in learning about the cosmos and kind of digging into that? Having that interest.
I guess it was in high school already. We have in high school that it's 13 years, depending on the state you're in, of high school at school that you have. And then in the last 3 grades, similar to college, you have to pick majors. So I picked physical science as one of the majors. And I guess I was always curious about, the big questions, why are we here? What is this? How does the universe function? And so forth. And that stuck with me, not so much during my professional career, maybe, but it was always present. And then going to the observatory just kind of reignited. And then having quit this full-time job and having a bit more spare time in my consultancy, I just dug in. And at that time, I was also still in the observatory. And actually, the lectures I gave in cooperation with the local community college were, basically just me digging into a topic, in a way documenting it in PowerPoint, and then just, speaking like a layman to other people. And I think people consciously or subconsciously always have this in them to ask these questions of what is it? I assume a lot of people don't explicitly ask themselves the question, but maybe towards the end of their life. So what is it? Why am I here? What was this for, so to say? Which is connected to me. So it's both on the physical science or astrophysics or cosmology side, but also from now you can pick your choice of words, religion or spiritual. I'm Protestant, so I've been baptized Protestant. I guess I'm not sure on the U.S. Denominations here, but I guess it would be something like Lutheran, because Martin Luther here in Germany, created the Protestant side of things. And I'm becoming religious here now. If you look into the Bible, and I don't mean to, it's my lack of knowledge of actually having read it in depth, I guess, but it's not very direct. Things you read are not very direct,
metaphorical,
unless you're in the realm of Jesus, and then it is pretty direct about 10 Commandments and so forth.
Absolutely.
And if you, and it happened so that while I was at work, actually in a training course for Lean Six Sigma Black Belt when I was in the UK, I saw a show on TV, and it talked about a scientist, Zara Lazar, who was doing MRIs of meditators, so long-time meditators, and she was checking what's the impact of meditating on their brain structures. And that triggered a whole journey of me of looking into this topic and ultimately into Buddhism. Because there is, that's a long answer to a fairly simple question. There's a methodology called mindfulness-based stress reduction by somebody called, now I forget his name, I have to look it up, Jon Kabat-Zinn, I'm sorry. He's actually in the US, should be in, but it doesn't matter what state he's in. And he created, based on actually one of the path of Buddhism being mindfulness, this method to reduce stress, respectively pain in cancer patients and others, and it's based on mindfulness. And that's what I discovered when I looked into, well, what is Zara Lazar talking about here, and I discovered mindfulness, which has become a bit of a hype over the last 15 years. In the US particularly, and also around the globe. And the MBSR is actually strictly secular, so it has nothing to do with religion. They don't talk about, the maximum they will tell you about is that it's maybe from a ancient wisdom or something like this, and not even that they dare to say, because usually when it becomes religious, something is tainted and you can't use it. So I realized it came from Buddhism, and I just took a deep dive, and I'll keep it at that.
I wanted to talk about some very interesting things with the cosmos. For one, let's just go with the technology aspect. James Webb Space Telescope just got launched fairly recently after decades in development. With the ability so far to using gravitational lensing, which I want to talk to you about, is able to see about 250 million years after the Big Bang, or maybe the Big Bang. That's still all theoretical. Have you learned anything about the James Webb Space Telescope, or seen some of the images?
Yeah, I mean, I when I was still in the observatory, I think it was in the process of getting fixed and set up and then launched later. I looked at the images, the recent ones, because they were just published. It's been one of my fascinations about the universe, seeing these images that Hubble had produced, like the deep field, which shows just a speck of the universe, and it just shows the amount of galaxies that you can see there. James Webb is just it's just, well, simply put, just a better camera to go deeper and see much clearer pictures. If you look at the few images that they have now, they're just extraordinary, given the distance they can look and the clarity and the more depth of these pictures. The telescope has a limit. It can see deeper than Hubble, So it won't go all the way to the Big Bang because that's not possible anyway.
Because it's still
the furthest-
receding away from us, right? Like we receded away from it, so we're moving faster than light can even. That's why it's redshifted, right?
Not even that. The maximum we can see back is the background radiation.
Okay.
Because before that it was nothing visible, nothing propagated, so to say, into the universe to look back into. There was no stars. No stars have formed, or galaxies for that matter. So you can't see that far. But it's pretty far back and further back than Hubble saw. And what I find amazing is it shows so, just as Hubble did, it shows so brilliantly the insignificance of us in some ways.
Right.
I'm sure you heard this, that there's more stars than sand on Earth, or sand kernels on Earth. And that's just the way it is. If you just look to the skies, you can get depending on where you live and how much light
Pollution
influences
you
on
have.
this.
Yeah, all the light
Yeah,
pollution.
you can see the stars pretty well, and it's like, okay, what are we doing here? What are we worrying about in our little movie of life here? And that's what I think the pictures show. It's it's large. I'm sure you know a little bit about the dimensions. I mean, it's just ridiculous. 10 to the power of.
Right. Yes. So the gravitational lensing, I guess that's how we can see deeper, and it only happens in certain situations, which is kind of odd to me. I guess I should have done a little more research about gravitational lensing, but there's just so many topics that I had to think about. Like,
and by the way, we can repeat. I because you mentioned some of the topics, I looked some of the stuff up and pulled some of the slides I had from all the presentations. I mean, you talked about gravitational lensing and how that may make us to see further. I mean, the lensing is just the effect of gravity on the light that we see, simply put.
right.
So light gets stretched and then it appears differently, and in a way you can look behind objects, so to say. And it's just because of the massive masses that are floating around in the universe, and then you get this gravitational effect ultimately, very simply put. And
It's almost like a focus lens. Like if you look on the edges of the galaxies on the outside of the lens on some of those pictures, you could see them stretched by their light stretched by the immense gravity. And I wondered, is that because of that allowed us to see? Is it almost like a focus lens, so you can see a little deeper, a little further?
And maybe I should make one caveat. I'm not a scientist,
right?
So I might tell you stuff that's completely off here.
That's
but
fine.
You can always double check me. Let's do it this way. Let me share my browser, maybe, if I can try. Let's just look at one of the pictures because you see the
up as well.
Yeah, if you want to,
why don't
you pull up James Webb and look at the one where you see it clearly, because there you see these pieces of circles, and you see the effect in a way. I don't, because you were saying that you can see further.
Maybe I'm misinterpreting that, though. That could be on me, just my ignorance.
I think
gravitational lensing does indeed allow us to see galaxies further away than we normally would. about infrared is it can see through all the space dust. That was one of the huge advantages of the James Webb over the Hubble, is its ability to see the stars forming inside of these giant nebulas.
Yeah, you can see if you just do web, it's www.nasa.gov. You'll see the website, and then you'll see these images. And you're right, depending on what instruments it has on it, you can, like I'm assuming it has all the ones that it needs, also radio waves and so forth, or not radio, X-ray, I wanted to say.
Okay, I've got some images right here. Yeah, I've got
it should go to Flickr, because they put it on Flickr. And what does it say? To know science, blog images, video. Do you have the Flickr website?
You can share. You can share a link in chat. Let me show you. Okay. Chat window. I'm gonna say, hey.
Yeah,
share a link in chat. So there you go. Perfect. I'm looking at it now. Perfect. I did have some images pulled up, but this is good. Yeah. So which one in particular? Like I'm down to the one with the 3 galaxies that will eventually merge, which is pretty interesting. Does it show the name of this? It doesn't give me the name of it.
If you click on any of them, it'll have description in it. I think it's actually 5 and 1, 2, 3, 4 is actually in.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, there's very interesting.
You're sharing on your side only, right? You're only recording it. Okay.
I'm sharing. Everyone can see my screen.
Except for me.
Not you guys. Sorry, I don't. It would do something really strange if I tried to share.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. So if I'm assuming you're at the one that shows the Galactic 5, as it says in the description.
Got it. Yes.
And I love looking at those pictures, and it's been, by the way, because the observatory has also telescopes, and if you actually ever look through a quote-unquote normal or even semi-professional telescope, you'll be disappointed if you've seen pictures of Hubble or James Webb, because it's just it's impressive anyway, but it's not the same, obviously, because this is a different technology and depth and so forth. But that's why I've never gotten into observing actually myself. I mean, I have a telescope at home here. It's plenty to push it outside and look at the moon, and it's awesome, but if you've seen these images, you can't see this kind of stuff, of course, through a normal telescope, unless you do massive, graphic altering afterwards, taking pictures and basically putting the pictures together. I mean, it's a lot of work. One of the colleagues from the university, the observatory actually, is pretty professional, and it's lots of work. Yeah, so you were talking gravitational waves, but this picture here, with the 5, I think it's 5, yeah, it should be 5, the 5 galaxies here, and they're interacting, they're going to merge basically, in the black holes inside are going to, it's going to be in the end probably 1. I mean, this is just, and if you zoom in, because the quality is, if you just tap once even, and you kind of focus on the middle here, you see in the background, these disks, and so these are galaxies. It's not stars.
And they're redshifted too. That means they're very far away.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous. And then you can look up. I think one of the comparison is, if you try to get a feeling of, well, what am I looking at in terms of the area in the sky? And if you hold your finger out and you would have a grain of sand, or you'd point, it's kind of like, you're pointing, the telescope is showing usually something like a small speck of what you would point at the sky. So if you consider you have a 3D sphere around you, and you have this kind of filled sky with galaxies, it's just mad, to grasp it even,
Right.
And And these are just, gorgeous pictures. You were referring to the, infrared, and there's, if you go back to the Flickr slide thingy, I think it shows, I think, a supernova, the dying star final performance in fine detail.
Yes, sir.
And if you click on this, I think it has a 2-picture picture, and scanning through the description, what does it say? The left is red, smaller than on the right, light blue. It doesn't say which instruments it was. I have to scan, read here. Yeah, here it says on the right is the same nebula as seen by Webb's MIRI instrument in the mid-infrared. So that's on the right. Mm-hmm. So if you, and the left is, so that's near infrared on the left, and on the right is seen in mid-infrared. Yeah. So if you see those two pictures, they're both infrared, which you also have to get your head around, because the trick in a way is that you think this is visual. It's not visual, like, this is infrared, assigned colors. So then we look at it, we're like, oh, it looks like this. No, it doesn't look like this if you, would observe it with your bare eye. You have to remind yourself of that. So you can see the spectrum of lights, depending on what instrument the telescope has or is looking through, so to say. And then you can see these details, and you just look, the one is near infrared on the left, and then the right is mid-infrared waves. And you see that you can also, like an MRI from a bone or something, you can, look through and look at it, from different wavelengths, so to say, and get different detail.
Right. It's amazing how we're able to see all of these things using modern day technology, and just how much of what we just learning how much we don't know. You know what I mean? Even though like we're seeing all of these amazing things, it's just like there's more questions than answers. Yeah. So Andreas, you mentioned that you mentioned spirituality briefly. We just dabbled in technology briefly here as well. Like the technology and the material, are these cameras and whatnot. But what I'm interested in are the technologies in the spiritual, which I think you might be able to like dabble in a little bit more here. Because like you mentioned, meditation, prayer. And I'm interested to learn a little bit more about your perspective in like the cosmic consciousness and like any spiritual technologies that you might have like dabbled in this journey of yours. Would you be so kind to elaborate?
Sure. It's probably one of the fields that I'm still most interested in and following. That is the intersection of science, spirituality, and philosophy on consciousness. There's, I think it's a growing field. A massively growing field, and if you want to, I can go into what I think. I was just how should I say this, putting my pieces of the puzzle together and making what I think is a reasonable assumption to make on consciousness.
Oh, absolutely.
So to start off with, like I said, there's an intersection between and if it becomes boring or you don't get it, just stop me, please.
I'll ask questions for sure.
So it's an intersection. So you have, science on the one hand and spirituality on the other hand. If you look at and philosophy, by the way,
right.
If you look at the science side of things, if you're aware of Sir Roger Penrose by chance, who's a professor and gotten a Nobel Prize, and I think about 2 years ago, he has a theory developed he calls orchestrated object reduction with a gentleman, Dr. I assume he's also a professor, Stuart Hameroff, where you have a scientific pointer at where is consciousness created, respectively, how does it maybe function, and is it maybe a missing link into explaining the universe / general relativity, and quantum mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes the following, that, and I try to keep it simple and with my layman terms here, consciousness being a quantum mechanic effect that is happening all throughout the universe because of the gravitational effect onto the quantum systems. So if you have a superposition, and this is, I should actually do a slideshow on explaining some of these terms.
I know a good bit about this, by the way. So I'm right there with you. I'm tracking. You can think of superposition as a system that has two different states, and it's possible for it to exist in both. In physical terms, an electron has two possible quantum states, spin up and spin down. When an electron is in superposition, it is in both up and down at once. Only when it's measured does it drop out of superposition and adopt one position or the other.
Very simply put, the quantum realm is just the tiny little. You can go down to a macroscopic level where you go on to length that are 10 to the minus power of something in a way, and you can quantize. That's why it's called quantum. You can quantize energy like this, or also distances in a way.
Like a Planck.
It's measurable.
Like Planck size. They'll talk about stuff like that.
Exactly. Planck length, yeah, for
Yes,
example. The quantum physics was an explanation coming out of general relativity and special relativity back at Einstein time. So
1915.
think your general relativity and so forth, and it's needed to explain why light, for example, can behave like a particle or like a wave. So you have this quantum realm. I'll keep it at that. We can do a show, or I can go into this maybe later, because it gets too full maybe. So Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, who is an anesthesiologist, if I say it the right way, halfway. So he puts people to sleep in the hospital for operations. They developed this theory that, and the physics side of it is from Penrose, saying that because you have gravitational effect on the quantum realm, the wave function, as it's called, collapses. So this superposition states have to collapse, and when they collapse, that creates for superpositions in the universe, for example, something called proto-consciousness. Respectively, I looked at the brain because Hameroff was examining the brain, and he was always interested in looking into where does consciousness where is it being created, and there is structures, they're actually proteins called microtubuli, who can have quantum states. Well, they're like a little quantum computer that has quantum bits, and they end up being in superposition, and the wave function there has to break, and that's where consciousness then appears.
This is Stuart Hameroff to explain a little bit about the microtubules and the theory involved.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm an anesthesiologist. I went into that profession after medical school primarily to study consciousness. I had gotten interested in consciousness as an undergrad, and then in med school was oriented towards neurology, psychiatry, neuroscience, neurosurgery. But I didn't. The lifestyles didn't grab me, and I did a research elective in a cancer lab studying mitosis, how cells divide and the chromosomes are pulled apart by these spindles called microtubules, which are microtubules and centrioles. And at that same time, in the early 70s, a couple other things happened. It was discovered that microtubules were in all cells, because prior to that, the fixative agent for the electron microscope was dissolving them, and the inside of cells looked like a watery soup. But then when they changed, I think from osmium tetroxide to glutaraldehyde or something like that, all of a sudden they saw all the structure inside cells, including neurons. So neurons were full of these microtubules and cytoskeletal structures, which had a grid-like lattice, which reminded me of a computer, because the early 70s was, for me, also the beginning of the computer era. And I was trying to, learn and figure them out about Boolean switching matrices. And it all came down to some kind of switching matrix and interactions. And of course, synapses in the brain were thought to be that. But I thought microtubules might be processing information at this basic level. And I got that idea that they were computers. And I worked on that for 20 years, going into anesthesia, studying how anesthesia worked, saying there was all this information processing at a deeper level. And then one day after 20 years, somebody said, okay, let's say you're right. How would that explain consciousness? How would that explain feelings, love, joy? The so-called heart problem, which came along later. And I had to admit they were right. I really didn't know. they suggested I read a book by Roger Penrose called The Emperor's New Mind, which had a mechanism but needed a structure. So I did, and here we are, another 30 years later.
Wow.
Well, I should say that what happened was that he and I teamed up and we developed a theory of quantum computations in microtubules inside neurons of the brain, which underlie brain activity. And this was a controversial idea for a lot of reasons. People thought biology is too warm, wet, and noisy for delicate quantum effects. But that turned out not to be the case. Plants use quantum coherence in photosynthesis. I'm looking out at the mountains and trees and plants, and they're all using photosynthesis to take sunlight and convert it to chemical energy by a process that goes through a protein where the energy gets converted to coherent excitons, quantum particles or entities that go through 7 different chromophores in superposition at the same time. And that quantum efficiency allows the sunlight to be converted to chemical energy that we eat and the animals eat and so forth. So without that, there may not be light and may not be life nor consciousness.
Now, I just listened to an interview of both of them yesterday again, because they have been granted money to test things, and they just tested on microtubule anesthesia to prove in a way that consciousness is turned off there, or this function of the microtubule is turned off. So you have this very promising and like you said in the beginning, we know still very little. Even this theory doesn't give all the answers. But now here goes my spin-off from it. Because I have to maybe mention something, that's relevant here. Why I have an even stronger motivation to look at these topics. Our middle son had died about a year ago due to an accident. He was 17.
My condolences.
Thank you. And that's tough. I'll be childish doo-doo. And it makes you think, not that I haven't thought about it before, it makes you think, okay, what is this thing of life? Now he's dead, is that it?
Right.
And being a bit tainted by Buddhism, it would be this rebirth idea where you have this piece of consciousness imprinting a next life, so to say. And now my theory would go, and I'm throwing it out there, and it's the layman's stuff, of course, and it's I can't give you the hows, but I kind of think, we're looking at given that you have these, there's another scientist, I don't know her name of heart, she's Italian, I can look it up. And she's actually looked at the orchestrated object reduction on a level of the universe. And she has calculated that you have this consciousness effect on the universe. So if you think about it from a religious perspective, all of a sudden you could point at something like God or pure consciousness from a Buddhist perspective and say, well, we have consciousness as a
result,
as a structure of space-time or of the universe, just like space and time. And I kind of made the thing up saying, okay, we're looking at a consciousness quantum field that when you're conceived, and we may have these nodes of consciousness in this field that then connect to a physical body. And then if I make it shorter, you have your life and your experiences, and memories are stored actually in the brain in this, probably, according to the theory, in this microtubule, and you have this quantum information kept after you die. Now, you might think that's mad, but then I will also point you to studies, and this is scientific studies of a gentleman called Ian Stevenson, who has documented cases of usually kids that can remember past lives. And to the point is where the explanation of their memories is difficult to explain, other than that they were actually reborn, respectively, reincarnated, depending on whatever form you want to have.
Mm-hmm.
And not only do they have memories, they have injuries on their bodies from past lives. So if the person has died, for example, from a gunshot or a knife wound, they have scars.
It's almost like quantum tunneling or something. It's kind of creepy in a little ways. Like quantum tunneling may even tie into this kind of consciousness piece. Maybe it's happening somewhere else. I don't know. It's like there's a place where we wait before we're put into our new host body or what have you.
Yeah, this quantum information somehow seems to, and now you can go off and say that's a whole lot of nonsense and so forth, but
we like talking. This is freestyle. We really like just to let loose here.
If I were saying just nothing related to anything that's scientifically looked at, then I would tell myself okay, you're in the realm of belief. Of course, some of the stuff is because then you could say, how do you carry this quantum information? Because they memorize places, events that happened, and so forth. That. How is that carried over? Respectively, why don't the three of us remember our past lives? Is that a fair question, and so forth. But with quantum entanglement and this on the quantum scale, we really don't know everything. And if I can make this connection through consciousness, then that seems to make a whole lot of sense in terms of. This could be a possibility where it carries over if consciousness is anyway affecting the universe. Traditions, and I would argue it's all of the religious traditions. From Christianity, it would be heaven. Usually you say heaven, or God. Then that's just pointing to the consciousness present in the universe. And by the way, there's lots of definitions of God if you look it up on Wikipedia. So. And if you look at Buddhism and Hinduism it would be the Atman, the eternal soul that reincarnates, and Buddhism would be more of an imprint that goes from one consciousness to the next. So that's my take on consciousness and it being it's. I started off by saying this. I'm curious and I always wanted to understand things, generally speaking, respective of the universe. You have to answer, I think, the question of consciousness in the context of physical science, and people are, more than ever, looking at this piece and trying to make sense of it.
How about have you ever heard of there being like microscopic wormholes all around us, or heard that wormholes could be like really tiny and we'd have they wouldn't have any effect on us, but I'm just nerding out a little bit and thinking, well, there we got wormholes too. There's another way for stuff to pop in and out, from nowhere seemingly.
Yeah, these structures of you can want to talk about is also black holes. If you look at things, or if you look at the structures of the universe, and you have things like black holes where you have massive amounts of mass assembled to the point of where it breaks physical science in a way, and you have these strange effects in this area. And what's after, or what was at the beginning of the universe? Is there going to be another one? Which I would point also to Roger Penrose's theory of conformal cosmology, where he I'll say claims or proves that you have recurring eons. So recurring universes that, the universe hours will cool down. If I really be simple about it, cools down, everything dies off, because black holes also radiate Hawking's radiations. So all the mass will go away. And we're talking now, I think it was 10 to the power of 100 or something, in terms of time. Eventually, all you have left is massless particles like photons who don't have mass and they don't care about time. And then from a mathematical perspective, you have a state, and I'll keep it as simple as that, where another universe could be, could be started again. And then you have another eon coming out. So these structures are not clear. And like mentioned in the beginning, a lot of things we just don't know, and we're just, trying to make sense of it, which is also crazy if you think about the capacity of a human brain. to give all this thought and have this conscious experience.
Absolutely. I like what you like. I appreciate your answer. It was really in depth. Something that I picked up from it was, we observe the physical with the physical and the spirit, like by the spirit. And I feel like, as we were talking, you mentioned that, time and space have like a particular set of consciousness. And obviously, like these children who, potentially had a past life, they have this form of consciousness. So I'm just wondering, is that like evidence for when the physical and the spiritual like intersect, or can you explain a little bit more?
I don't think. Wait, let me turn on my light here because it's getting darker here. They intersect in terms of the sciences for sure, and I think the separation is never there. We make it because we don't understand. If you look at Buddhist texts, and this, by the way, these are, I could open my bookshelf on the back here. There's a massive amount of detail that Buddhists have documented by observation, and a lot of it makes just a ton of sense. I'll pick a simple one. The first truth of Buddhism is, life is suffering.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't argue there.
You're either struggling or you're dying. One guest said, struggling or you're dying.
And then, the second one, okay, that's because your attachment the suffering exists because of attachment to desires. And that's also truth. And I could go on also on the cosmology side. So I think you were asking, is this where, consciousness, there's these intersections.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, because of our human experience being typically limited to our sensory perception and our thoughts and emotions. Mm-hmm. And I've been contemplating this, why for the heck of it can't we feel consciousness? You can, the whole meditation practice, is because I don't know if you ever meditated, and this is just very simple,
regularly, yeah,
to keep it secular, so to say. If you just sit and just focus on something, it almost doesn't matter what. If you want to focus on your breath, and you do that just for 5 minutes, and you just really focus on the in-breath and the out-breath, you will notice, we could do this exercise, but that's just, I'll tell you what you will end up feeling.
We'll take a 5-minute break. I'll pause the stream.
Even during, you will notice how your brain is just typically can't stop thinking.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you'll see this, constant flow of thought. And if you practice this in a way of, not quieting your mind, but just being able to observe this and understand it, then you do get a sense for this conscious observer that's inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the interesting part is, okay, where is that? Where is this? What is this? Because it's not this, if I ask you, point to yourself, you will have difficulties because I'll start asking you questions. Well, if you point to your body, then I'm like, yeah, that's just your bones, your flesh, your liquids, and so forth. And then in the end, it's like, maybe you get to this consciousness being what is actually yourself. Now I'm kind of not answering your question anymore, but there is these intersections of consciousness, and you can tap into them, I guess, on the spiritual side and on the science side. As far as I'm concerned, you need consciousness to understand the universe.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And theories that don't have it, I think, are or if we can't explain consciousness, we're missing a huge amount of something in the universe, I believe.
What's your thoughts on ayahuasca and psychedelics? Because I've heard of many accounts of people communicating and having group visions, and coming away from that experience. Not only people that have had cancer and had fear of death that come away from it with no fear at all, and you've had people that completely changed they've lost a stutter off of one use of psilocybin mushrooms. There's been a lot of different accounts. I just was wondering if you had any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I've been curious to try DMT. It's not legal, I guess, in Germany and not in the US, I believe, either, or maybe only in certain places.
It is being tested, though, by the way.
Yeah.
There is some tests being done here.
If I refer back to Stuart Hamroff and Roger Penrose, so they are going to test these psychedelics on the microtubules, and the assumption is it's kind of like the counter to the drugs to turn off your consciousness. This might enhance your consciousness. I mean, if you heard, and I've watched some of the videos of people going through this and afterwards explaining, and I'm sure you're aware of Joe Rogan. He's described it, and he had folks on and talking about it. You can dismiss it as your brain is just giving you some sort of dream, so to say. From my perspective, it becomes extremely interesting because you could challenge yourself and say, well, why do we assume is that what our brain can receive, because I look at the brain also as a receptor for consciousness, that this is it. Why do we think that's it?
Right.
Because
we only have so many perceptions, like you speak to earlier. There's things that we can't see that we know exists. Electricity can't be seen, but it has an effect on your brain. There may be other things that we just don't have the ability to observe, or if you believe in God, you that's something you can't perceive either.
Yeah, if you hear people's experience, or also people's experience of near death experiences, which is some way similar but also different. You get to think. If I go back to consciousness, that's our human struggle, as far as I'm concerned. I talked about my son dying. I mean, in my human experience, that's just absolutely unbearable. Absolutely. If I tap into my little theories here, or spirituality and physical science, I could say, okay, fine, we're anyway connected. This human experience I had with him, that's definitely past, in the sense of that I won't see him like this in this physical presence. Respectively, his conscious imprint may continue. And then that's kind of sad, because that means I can't access it right now. But we're anyway connected. And this is one wisdom I would share is, and you can think about this really easily. Just think about, if you go to the store, or if you buy a loaf of bread, if you start thinking of how many folks were involved in, putting the crop on the field, watering it, harvest, then manufacturing, selling, and so forth, you can easily see on the human level how interconnected we are. Thich Nhat Hanh calls that interbeing. Respectively, if you now make it wider to nature and the cosmos as a whole, anyway, we're not independent. We have this false sense of I, which is anyway fake. That's not real.
That's called, what is that called? Death of the ego. Some people have experienced that during psychedelics, where that I no longer exists. So you become more connected with the nature around you.
Yeah, that's why I poke around at it. You're exactly right. I mean, that's what you can. I mean, people have this, or can get there if you contemplate. I won't call it meditation. If you just, if you focus a bit inward, you can discover the universe. And if you think a little bit about it, that's why I said earlier, this little movie of our human experience, that's what it is. I mean, let's be clear. You're not ultimately, I must say, of course, physically we are and so forth, but you're not ultimately the person sitting there. And this might sound off or weird or something, but if you think about it, that's not true. Because you have this human experience for sure, but that's not your essence. I'll say it like this. So to say, And that's, if you look at psychedelics and the experiences in there, it's just absolutely mad, with the different shapes and maybe sometimes, usually I think it's gestures or other things, that I seem to kind of, poke around at you and so forth. And you have this, if I go into my little model that I created recently in my head, it's like we have this quantum field node that's connected to our physical body, has this human experience, and we have this interaction. The consciousness node has this interaction with the physical body, but then, when the physical connection is lost and you die, you go back to where it comes from, which being a consciousness, and you could have the opposite view. That would be, I guess, maybe atheistic. You're dead. Everything I said now is false, because if the microtubuli store the information, they can't have any effect on the outside, and then your memories are lost and everything's gone. That's it. Yeah, you could have that view and make a case for that. I think it's
it feels pessimistic in a way to me, to just think that, because then why are we here? I think that's what humans want. They want to, reach for the stars. They want to reach for something outside of our grasp, try to understand. And I feel like that just kind of stomps on it a little bit,
And it's not logic. Nothing goes into nothingness. You have to think about that for a moment. If you have, take an apple, you throw it on the ground, you leave it there for a long time, it doesn't disappear into nothingness. It dissolves into the elements that's there, water mainly, and then, some of the other one, and in the end, the worms come and eat it in its soil. Now you could argue for the physical body, that's the same for a human being. We're mainly water, and then we're basically the elements that are predominant in the universe. But there's this consciousness thing, and that's difficult to talk away. You could say, okay, the brain is a machine, like a radio that sends, like a speaker that sends and maybe even receives, and then when you turn it off, that's it. You could have that view and say, well, that's all it is. You turn it on, and you can tap into consciousness of the universe and have a conscious experience, and you turn it off, and that's it. It's I would argue it doesn't end there. That seems to be an approach where you miss the point that it just doesn't disappear.
So I mentioned I want to discuss. Sorry, Turtle. I didn't know if you wanted to follow up or anything, or if you had another question.
It's very much like, the first law of thermodynamics, where energy is neither created nor destroyed. So that's really interesting. I mean, you're also talking about how, the person sitting here, us that's currently sitting here, is not us. I was thinking about that, and it's like a picture that I took when I was in 7th grade, for example. That image isn't me. That's just a likeness of me. So do you mind just kind of dabbling in furthermore into that?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, but let's go there.
I think I'm lagging.
No. Oh no, I hear you fine.
Yeah, we can hear you, bro.
Let's think about it. I have a slide on this, but I think I can describe it maybe without. If you look at, you're saying, okay, I'm Andreas, so that's a name given to me. Okay, then I have this experience of being me, and that is what am I? So you have the physical body, that's, like I said, bones and flesh and mainly water ultimately. Then you have your senses. Let me see if I can open this picture. I can talk more directly to it.
I'll pull it up over here if you want to link it. Or did you already? Or you're talking about so you can see it while you tell us? My bad. I didn't.
Yeah, wait. Then I should be able to. Can I plug it into the chat and you can pull it up? Is that possible?
If it's a link on the website, yes, or a link on a link, yes, I can pull it up. You may even be able to share it there. You can try to drag and drop, maybe.
Let's see if I can. just copy.
I know a lot more about Discord than Zoom.
I've not. Let's see what it does if I put it in the chat, but you can't pull up in the chat. That's I'm good. Let me just talk about what I'm saying. It's a pretty simple picture. So you have your form. Now this is in a way, I also have this in my over leadership methodology. I'll call a body of knowledge. I'll say, so you have your form. It's, you have your bones, you have your heat that the body produces, your liquid, the blood, the tears, and so forth, and your breathing air. You have your sensations. Usually they're in three categories: pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Then you have your senses, eyes, vision, ears, hearing, nose, sense of smell, tongue, taste, and skin touch, and maybe the intellectual mind. And then you have your perception of this, so of the sense perceptions in a way, and then you have mental formations. So these are habits, thoughts, concepts, opinions, prejudice, and so forth. Things like joy, compassion, happiness, desire, hatred, anger, and so forth. And you can put those in categories. And then you have your consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I say, you're not you, I'm talking maybe on an ultimate truth level. Mm-hmm. Physically, of course, that's physically who you are, and your consciousness is parked in this body, and that's, I guess, the differentiation, where it's like, it's ultimately, that's not really you. Mm-hmm. Because your emotions come and go. You're not your emotions.
Yeah, we are constantly changing beings. So that makes sense.
And you're not your thoughts either. We get stuck in this, because we grow up and, as a baby and then a child, and it's like, you have a name, you have this, you're this entity physically and so forth. But it's not ultimately true. And this may take some time to think about it, but it's you're not your thought, because you can get lost in this movie of life. And mm-hmm. I would argue the majority of people do. They don't think about it. They're attached to their desires, and it starts early. And this could be anything from eating too much sugar to alcohol, respectively, looking for fame and money and so forth, and never actually realizing what they're ultimately really want, mm-hmm. And really desire, and not leading a skillful life. So that's that. I don't know if that made it any deeper or more understandable.
That makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah, it's like kind of like what C.S. Lewis said. Like, if there's nothing in this world that can satisfy me, that must mean I'm made for something else, for sure.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thanks for answering my question.
Sure.
Mr. Metzen.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about time travel and in a way that we actually can. Well, I guess an individual can move into the future with a large enough black hole that they don't get spaghettified when they hit the event horizon. I read, and I don't have anything to reference or whatever. But as you get closer to a black hole, you get something what's called you encounter something called time dilation. So depending on the mass of the black hole, the larger the time dilation. So if you're an observer outside of the black hole and you're watching, let's say we're watching me fall in, as they get closer to the event horizon, depending on the black hole is massive enough, I will start to red shift, and at some point I will freeze, and you will never see me go into it, ever. My perspective, on the other hand, would be I would see, looking out of the black hole, the entire history of the universe play out in front of me in seconds. What do you know about that? What do you think about that as a theory, or just as an interesting topic?
Well, let's talk. Very well. It's been a topic of science fiction, and it's sometimes scary if you look at Star Trek, the original series, and Uhura having this thing in her ear. We now have that. It's called a Bluetooth headset. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's time travel may be a bit tricky. What you're describing is with time dilation is that time moves slower if you're getting close to the speed of light. Now that's talk real sense. If you would be approaching a black hole, you would just be destroyed. So not much use there, because the gravitational pull is just ridiculous. So that doesn't do us any good, even if you have a spaceship and so forth. Now you could argue. I will go ahead and join your train of thought. Now the U.S. government now has said, look, we don't understand some of these aerial phenomenons that we've seen here. You heard about TikTok and this TikTok shape.
Yeah, the TikTok.
Going at ridiculous speeds without any apparent propulsion.
Mm-hmm.
You could say, okay, what about if I have a spaceship that kind of turns off space, time, gravity, something, as it then maybe, if you can go faster than the speed of light, which, is by the physics not possible. The speed of light is the fastest speed that something can travel. I don't know, I'm a bit stuck on time travel. The whole idea of maybe moving around space, respectively, the effect of entanglement, where you can carry information from A to B, instantly in a way. That's interesting in terms of teleportation aspect, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
So time travel itself, going back, I don't know, it would kind of, Marvel is doing a good job of creating this we could talk about multiverse as well. I just listened to yesterday to a gentleman, I forget his name now. He's probably one of the dominant figures here, or professors on the multiverse, or what were they called? I don't know the term now. That basically every time that the wave function collapses, a new universe is done. I'm not in favor of it. It kind of because it's this pure follow the Schrödinger equation. That's it. There's nothing else. There is no collapse of the wave function, which then creates this ridiculous amount of parallel universes. So to say, from a level of argument, you can maybe make that. And I was triggered because Marvel is making lots of money on pressing their multiverse movies, which is entertaining, but probably not what it really is, so to say.
Well, in an infinite universe, if it is infinite, then even the smallest chance of something can happen has a definite chance of happening. Yeah,
and it's if you think about what you could think about, are we the only ones? I would argue no. I would even go as far as, I don't know if you watched, Joe Rogan had everybody on actually who was relevant. He had the scientist who worked at Area 41, I think, or something.
S7. You're talking about Bob Lazar. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So if you listen to him, okay, you can say, it's just another nonsense. But anyway, then you listen to the Air Force pilots, or one of the pilots, who saw that Tic Tac shape, and you look at the videos, it's like, how do you talk that way? And then there's other incidents, I think, where, I think weapon silos in the U.S. were turned off ultimately when there was some military conflict, and, strange things like this.
Right.
And you could argue, and I think that's what Joe Rogan also said, the logic would be, if you have such hyper intelligent and progressed life forms, they look at us as an ant pile, and why bother? So it's just like us passing an ant pile. We don't go in there and make a mess of it usually, unless we're children. So it's there's a lot of, that's the beauty of it, and there's a lot of, we started with that also. There's a lot of unknowns still that we can't explain. And if I attach myself again to the spirituality of things, and maybe Buddhism, a lot of there's been a lot of, and I can't talk as intelligent about Islam or Christianity in a way, because I haven't dug as deep there. I haven't found as much as easily, I must say. There's just been huge amounts of observations of I will call them scientists now, because these folks, if you sit and you observe and go inwards, I think there's a lot to discover. And I think we omit that fact that there's a whole, and I will call science and not spirituality. There's a whole cosmology, definitely, for because there's books just on cosmology inside of Buddhists, that explains a lot of these some of these things. Some of it is also weird, but funny enough, if you look at you may be aware of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, that describes these states when you die and then when you're reborn, and the realms you can go to. Simple ones are animal realms. Okay, that's nice. I can relate to this. But some of these realms are spooky. In a way, like heaven and hell realms, and describing what's like there. And this is, of course, what's kind of where the Buddhist side of things lose me, because it's kind of like the psychedelics. It's like descriptions of things that are so off of our scale of human experience, where you're like, okay, I don't get it anymore. You're talking to this hell realms and heavenly realms, and but like I said earlier, why the heck do we think that our little conscious receptor here, our brain, is actually receiving everything that's relevant in the universe?
Yeah. I mean, apparently we're only using like 10% of our brain power anyway. I don't know if that's factual, but you hear it a lot. I mean,
well, for sure not enough. That's for damn sure. I mean, even it's just. I mean, you can see it if you have kids. Once you will see. Yeah,
I have two.
If you feed your kids, and you can kind of compare, which is me now, but if you compare, and you can just observe in society, if you, it's just like a plant. If you feed a kid information and knowledge, it grows, as would a plant with nutrients and water and the sun, and it uses more capacity. My children, learn chess and board games and so forth, and it was very early where I became irrelevant in terms of being able to win. So yes, we don't use our brain capacity because we don't train it enough and do other things with it.
So that brings me into, there's some things that I'll try to tell my kids about. I like them to have an open mind. And see, their grandmother takes them to church. And I like that too, that they have that out, right? But anytime my little girls will mention things that they see over here, like anything to do with space or stuff like that, like I'll kind of blow their minds a little bit with some of the stuff that I've picked up, And they'll go back and tell their grandma, and she's like, "Oh, that's all. Everything on YouTube is fake. Don't listen to any of that." I think there's kind of that's not a problem as long as those people aren't in charge of legislation. You know what I mean? Like it gets a little dangerous. Religion can be a little dangerous at times. Like I literally knew someone when I worked at Blue Cross Blue Shield that believed that the Earth was only 7,000 years old. Straight believed it. Said that carbon dating was nonsense, and you just wouldn't believe it. So,
yeah, I mean, it's with any belief or knowledge that one can have. I mean, if that's what you want to believe, okay, fine. Then it's difficult to tackle, maybe even nowadays, and I think, not maybe just even in the US, but globally, truth and science. And even science has become tainted, I would argue, where there's enough influence in the universities and dependencies on money where it's no longer as independent as you would want it maybe to be. And on the religious side, yes, I mean, it's a challenge. I mean, if you, like you said, to have an open mind, even on the religious side of things, that makes a whole lot of sense. And it almost doesn't matter if it's just religion. I mean, you've seen the topics in the US, big split and separation in the US because of who was president, mad. And you have topics like, gender and pronouns all of a sudden, where you have these identity politics, that nicely split folks apart. So
which honestly shouldn't even be a discussion, in my opinion. Like, let people be who they want to be. Pull the legislation out of that. Like, I don't. That's what I don't get either. I'm sorry. I'm kind of taking a.
Yeah, I mean, it's relevant because we don't live in space. We live on Earth, and Earth has its structures in our society, and they very much play into this idea of what I was saying earlier, into our human experience that we then experience. I think that's a good topic because I would argue this topic of reconnaissance, or having information and understanding also the structures of how the society works, how macro politics and macroeconomics work, and to be clear on this, and to be curious. I'm not claiming, like for myself, I'm not claiming that my view is complete and so forth. But if you look at what's being presented to us from our politics, from our media, and that's independent now if you're talking left or right or middle or conservative or liberal, it's difficult because you have to understand that these structures are influenced, and they influence people. I'm not sure if I'm making sense here.
No, you're making sense. Like, they've become essentially the thought leaders and kind of like pastors without a pulpit, so to speak. But they're definitely preaching something, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's maybe I can name it. I mean, there's huge influence from pockets of power. And it's pretty simple. If you look at, BlackRock, Vanguard, huge investment funds, the money they manage is far more than GDPs of countries. If you look at rich people, Bill Gates has a huge influence on the world.
Even though he doesn't have the skill set involved with a lot of the things, just because he has power, he has money, he can.
He has his. They have their foundations usually where they park their money not to pay taxes, and then they make their influence known. And this is just one example. And then you have on the media level, I can definitely, for Germany it's the same in US, but it's slightly different. We used to have, or we still have, public radio and public television. The influence of, you won't hear anything critical on the whatever the current government is, because it's just become too entangled. And I think it's the same in the US. In the US, it's and on the private media, so to say, you have, and this is globally now, whoever owns the company, and it's a good exercise to sometimes look into, well, who owns this, who owns that. You have Fox News, you can go look who owns Fox News, you can go look who owns CNN, you can go look who owns MSNBC, to name the US versions of it, and you know what opinion they're going to have generally on the political scale, and you have to understand there's social sciences. There's a German professor that has great lectures on this. Social sciences completely understand how to influence people. And these structures exist. And I think it's extremely difficult. The good thing about current times is you can get information. When I'm 50, so I grew up without internet.
Me
believe it
too.
or not. So, and then when it came about, it's such an awesome tool. While it can be used, the structures that have been there. If you look at Facebooks and Microsofts and other big giants, tech giants, Twitter, their influence is huge. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous that posts get fact checked like that. Now you could argue, and I'll be let's hope your channel becomes wildly successful. So this will probably immediately be a topic if I say it like this. I don't mind. How should I say this? If you have illegal things and so forth, that's easy. But if it becomes opinion that is regulated, so to say, that's a big topic. So it's a complicated word as it is. And that's one of the realms that I've been gotten into when I switched and became a freelance consultant, because I have more time on my hand. It's just I've always been curious about how do these structures, how does our society work? How does it work on a global level? And you can look at the current political landscape, economic landscape, and it's difficult to understand in more depth, because of what you're being presented is not per se the truth, quite honestly.
Mhm.
And that's almost independent of what news channel you watch or who you talk to. And going back to your initial point, you live in, and I can only guess because I still have some connections to the US. We had this year during Corona pandemic measures as well, and still have it. And I think globally also in the US and Canada, and I know topics in Canada that have been difficult with the truckers, basically getting squashed by Trudeau.
Mhm.
It's yeah, the local, when the waves of emotions, I'll call it, are so personal that they, influence your neighbors and conversations with friends, then something is not going the right way. Let's put it this way.
Mhm.
Kind of like Roe versus Wade here, where they took females' rights to abortion away under most circumstances. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's this is also, if I connect it to science, this is a lot of it, I would argue, is social sciences and understanding the effects of, if media channels keep saying things, they become truth, or if politicians keep saying things, they become truth. And if you think there's no influence on topics, then you're naive or uninformed.
Mhm.
And it's massive. You have to understand it's massive. And you can, during COVID, you could nicely observe the influence of the media. And I will talk about Germany. I mean, anybody who objected to measurements, to the measures, like lockdowns and so forth, was put into, and the right to demonstrate was basically hijacked. So people who actually went on the streets were actually arrested. So, and if you were speaking against it, you were put into a right-wing conspiracy theorist scheme.
Mhm.
And you could literally observe how the media covered demonstrations like this, because people still went on the streets and so forth, and you could see these influences and how the mechanism works. And it's we talked about very interesting topics on the science and consciousness and so forth, but we all live in a normal human experience in our daily lives, and jobs maybe, and that's where this kind of stuff hits you, and then maybe you don't have time to think about the crazy fun stuff about who cares about if there's 5 galaxies rolling around and have a nice picture of it,
Right.
So yeah, it's and the influence on if people, if somebody believes the world is flat and 7,000 years old, fine. You can try and say, well, how do you explain this and how do you explain that? And if it doesn't work, and then that's that. As long as his opinion doesn't, influence your circle of influence, and he doesn't, I don't know, wants you to go to his church now, and that's his truth, then he can have that opinion, so to say, if it's inside family or so forth, and you have to, because you mentioned grandma and going to church with kids. I mean, that's just something you balance anyway, in whatever shape. I mean, ultimately, you also give your truth to your kids and your knowledge to the kids.
I tell them to keep an open mind. That's what I tell my children. Don't believe everything you hear. Keep an open mind. They're young still, 6 and 8, so they got their whole lives ahead of them.
I would even go as far as saying don't believe everything you see either, because kind of like back then it was just don't believe everything you hear or don't believe everything you read, because back then they didn't have the internet. But now that we have the internet and just kind of like access to all of these things, it's like, you can literally see GI in events and it's identical to the real thing. So it's like you got to question everything for sure.
yeah, and even news articles or news, live on live TV, where they had this during COVID as an example, where they were showing, how dramatic the impact was, and the pictures they were showing of where do they put people, or they were showing coffins and so forth, but the pictures were actually from something completely different.
Mhm.
They just misused,
Pushing
pictures
that
just to make.
narrative.
Yeah, so it's
Yep.
and with the whole artificial intelligence is also a great topic to go into. You can have videos like this where you can slap any face on anybody and make him talk. I can take Obama and
Deep fake.
make him talk whatever I want to talk him, because these functions are there. Sometimes even on apps on phones already. So
There's actually a website where I forgot what the website's called, but they have over like 10,000 people, and these people actually volunteered their image. It's absolutely crazy, but you can literally type a text, and these people will, like, men, women, child, whatever, and of any race, and with their voice. And you can't tell if that person actually said it or not, because of just how, like you said, the AI is just basically replicated the person's expression. It's insane. And yeah, you're right. Like, on top of this topic about like what we're constantly hearing, and also on the topic of what we're allowed to say, because like if we're controlled, or if the powers that be control what we say, it ultimately boils down to what we're ultimately allowed, like having the freedom to think.
You were mentioning how they can push any narrative that they wanted, and pretty much when a politician says something, it turns to truth, or the media continuously says something in the minds of the people, it turns into truth. Are you familiar with Heather Graham? Do you know this?
No.
He's a British author. He speaks about the Clovis. You know how in the North America, it was said for many years that Clovis were the first humans to settle North America. Well, that's actually kind of been debunked, because they found stuff from hundreds of thousands of years ago here. So apparently, and this is also something that archaeology has been trying to say is not real, but have you heard of the Younger Dryas impact?
No.
Okay, this is a series of, so 2 times a year we go through the Taurid meteor stream. I think it's October, November, and June and July time frame. We passed through this. So apparently this comet we passed through this stream. This is a comet that used to be one particular large object that just burst into many. So we passed through this stream, and apparently during the Younger Dryas impact, which is about 12,500 years ago, the northern ice caps and a lot of other places were all hit. And we're talking about instantaneous flash flooding on like biblical terms. You know what I'm saying? So this is probably why we have this burned into our consciousness. Like, they literally showed, this is on the Joe Rogan show, they have video of this. This guy who is a archaeologist, or sorry, he works with a geologist. Sorry, and they took aerial views, and they actually showed on a massive scale like what large amounts of water looks like when it rolls through, and we had a complete extinction of the northern megafauna, and a lot of the southern too, and they say a lot of that is based on these giant massive floods we're talking mile high glaciers that covered much of the northern United States into Canada and Alaska. Flash melted like instantaneously. Would have totally destroyed any kind of civilization that may have been in the northern United States. And the reason I'm talking about this is because there's a site that was uncovered. I think it's Tiahuanaca, and I'm butchering the name, but it's actually a little over 12,500 years old, and this is what they thought were they're like hunter-gatherers could not have done this, but this place was intentionally buried, and there's proof of that they had agriculture around this time that was before when it was supposed to have been invented. So it's a lot of it's. I'm really going off into the rabbit hole on this one.
No, it speaks about that we don't, well, many things that I thought about it, but it speaks about that we don't know everything, and that's also we start off also with James Webb Telescope, and we discover new things every day. It's also in the sciences or physical science, astronomy, and astrophysics, and so forth. There's just new stuff being discovered still. So it's tell your kids also to be curious on that level of don't think everything's clear. It's you can still discover things, like discover that those facts. I had to think about Elon Musk and SpaceX and the whole thing about going to Mars when you said about okay, we had this catastrophic event on Earth. It makes sense. I will combine it with and you have kids with the death of my son and this experience that you just or this event that you just explained. Life is fragile, extremely fragile, and we just don't think of it as this because it seems stable. Nothing happens now. The world doesn't fall apart in this moment, this moment, and this moment, and this moment. I go to bed, I wake up, my house is still there. Everything's hunky-dory, but it's not. There is these events, and chances, Murphy's law, if you want to, on the level of our son dying, respectively. I guess humanity has a good grip on observing the universe and knowing what's coming our way, and maybe even some defenses. But I would argue nothing would defend the big asteroid, or meteorite, hitting Earth. Ultimately, so life is very fragile. So on the sense of let's talk Elon Musk and his plans to go to Mars. Yeah, good idea, and good for him. Look at the technology. It's just you look at this stuff. The first time I saw his Falcon rocket, actually touch ground and stand, that was science fiction becoming reality. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely massive. It's absolutely massive to be able to have this reusability, and he was completely right. And look at what he was able to build. And your kids will probably be able to go to Mars, and so maybe us if we wanted to. Lots of technology still has to be done so that we can survive the trip, so to say. But in any case,
I think that with YouTube, you got to pump out a lot of content too, which is why we also stream games. Like and subscribe.
Yeah, I think to get traction on the social media is not, and that's how you contacted me. I assume you saw my astrophysics cosmos thing, which was really just me posting stuff I thought was interesting on my Facebook channel because I had actually signed up for Facebook mainly from my business perspective to have a corporate side, and ultimately maybe later to use the advertising because I think Facebook's advertising mechanism actually works. I had with the local observatory, I had the idea of doing how should I call it, an event downtown in an auditorium and sell tickets, about the whole topic of space travel and the latest developments and whatnot. And if you actually put advertisement on Facebook for not so much money, you actually get a good bandwidth. It's easier than just to put an ad, maybe not easier, but it's also an option compared to putting an ad in the local newspaper. So yeah, and to create, I think it's difficult ultimately because a lot of people are doing it. My YouTube stuff, ultimately you have to also develop or put content out that people actually want to enjoy, so to say, or actually enjoy. The whole gaming. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say that it's kind of hard to assume what somebody enjoys and what they don't enjoy. You know what I mean? Yeah. But like one of the lessons that one of my sales coaches gave me was you don't want to try to attempt to persuade someone who doesn't like your product to buy it. Rather, you want to focus on your current client base. You want to focus on those people and just essentially just continue improving their lives. And that way, they'll turn into fans, and obviously they're going to start talking about you. So it's just like, if you got something, Mr. Andreas, like I just keep pumping it out, like, because people are you're going to stumble upon one person, and that person's going to turn into a fan, and you just never know.
Yeah, I mean yeah, of course. You know, I would argue from my business perspective, if you create value, you may know Tony Robbins.
I do know Tony Robbins, yeah.
So, you know, but anyways, you know, if you create value, that could be value just in entertainment. I mean, on the gaming side, you know, my youngest is 16, and 2 years ago he was still fairly heavy, into gaming, respectively. You know, there's also YouTubers here. It's just ridiculous. I mean, there's a German guy with a channel, you know, and he did the usual, you know, Call of Duty and then the other games, Minecraft and so forth, which is already interesting, let's put it this way, that kids watch this. And of course they do, because it's, you know, they don't watch TV anymore, at least over here. There's lots of things going on the streaming world. And my ultimate was that this guy was actually not unpacking, he was building a Star Wars spaceship made from Lego. And people were watching him, which of course is also like it's no news, you know. I'm getting tickled by it, but it's actually no news. But I'm like, are you serious?
Yeah,
like,
I know.
I don't know. He had like, I don't know, 5,000 or 10,000 people watching him live.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
and it's just, of course, you know, he's done. I mean, he has his crowd, and you know, he's not a starter anymore. But yeah, I you know, if I go onto the business side of things, you know, when I quit this senior vice president job, you know, I wanted to do what I call now body of knowledge and aware leadership, which is basically an extension of mindfulness into leadership, and then bringing also my leadership experiences in this. And I never kind of followed through. And then I have all these areas of interest, and we covered a few of them, you know, on the astronomy side, respectively, astrophysics, cosmology, crypto. We didn't talk about this yet. You know, I started trading crypto in 2017, and that's just from a technology, hugely interesting. It's one of the technologies actually that I'm most interested in. If I were to start a technical job, then I would definitely go into the crypto area. You know, the leadership things, you know, the whole topic that we just talked in the last segment, you know, the end about what I call reconnaissance, you know, understanding the structures of society and the world, you know, influences of countries, macroeconomic events, and so forth. This as a topic, you know, leading a skillful life as another topic, you know, and then from the, you know, consulting side, you know, my opinion on maybe topics of how to build a sustainable company. So, and then I always wanted to, and now I'm actually at a point where I'm like, you know, because I had bought equipment, I'm not using my Rode microphone here, and you know, I had bought a new laptop a while ago to, you know, have a better graphics card and so forth. And when Justin contacted me, I was like, okay. And then I have this Stream Deck thing. It's, you know,
oh, nice.
That's actually, it's real nice. If you haven't gotten one, you can get one, you know, next time Amazon has their warehouse stuff going on. That's a cool thing. I mean, you can then, you know, you can just press buttons and it switches your scenes for you. It's you know, better than doing manually, trying to, you know, with shortcuts and so forth.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, and I just did that. No, it's just like my Facebook, I don't call channel, my Facebook page. You know, I have like almost, I think 8,600 followers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just, sometimes it also just takes time, you know. I mean, it's not like you know, I never push it. I never did run any ads on it or anything. It just grew organically over time, you know. Funny enough, I think I have a huge crowd in India for some reason. I don't know why that is. But, so, you know, yeah, we'll see where that goes. And some of the topics we talked about, I'm probably not going to do too much content on. Actually, I thought about, you know, the presentations that I've given on topics that you listened at the beginning. I think I wanted to make those available lectures online. And then I actually want to create content around the whole topic that I talk about, the consciousness thing, the physical science of things, but also, the finance thing, just advice on, which I actually call not financial advice because we don't want to give it financial advice and be held liable. But there's also not a lot of education. I don't know how it's in the US, but I assume it's the same as in Germany and Canada. There's, do you have courses in school on how to do finances? I don't think so.
No,
so
they don't teach that like they should. I had a history teacher when I was in high school that did care about that stuff and even talked about he doesn't understand why schools teach this. So he did have economics. He did develop his own economics curriculum, which was really helpful just in the fact of teaching young people to get their credit up, like going ahead and getting a credit card, spending a little bit, paying it off, trying to teach that. But yeah, like you're saying, they don't really have good education for that stuff, not in public schools at least.
Yeah, and there's you can find, of course, a gazillion content on the web or YouTube or whatever on advisors or people who tell you do this and do that and so forth. But it's just like with anything in life, you have to sift through it and then get your essentials, and understand it. So yeah, we'll see where that will lead me or not.
Did you want to go ahead and tell everybody how they can find you, like your social media stuff? And also, I'll provide links in the video.
Yeah, I would say, it's, you see, if you look in the background here, well, I have to go this way. That's my logo, actually. So Carpe Momentum, which actually means seize the moment. So carpemomentum.eu is my website, the main website. And then the other one is aware-leadership.com. That's my leadership site, but you also get from that to, from my main website. And if you look at those two, you'll see the business side of things of myself and then the Aware Leadership. I think I do link my crypto trading view ideas on my main site. And I think I even, for some funny reason, I put on my business side a link to my Facebook astronomy or astrophysics site. Yeah.
Turtle, did you have some questions? Any other questions for him related to business or anything? It sounds like that's a topic he wouldn't mind discussing.
I do have a question, but it's not related to business, actually.
That's fine.
It's kind of related. It's kind of related back to the original subject of our podcast, which is the cosmic consciousness. And I'm just, Mr. Andreas, I'm just wondering, how has your journey down, this path affected your Protestant faith?
Well, I didn't add that I'm not a practicing Protestant. So
I see.
Sorry,
you mentioned that you were.
No, it's okay. Yeah, yeah, it's right. But you could be Catholic and never go to church.
Right, I'm Baptist.
So I'm if you listen really carefully, I said I'm baptized Protestant. So I don't go to church. So and I have my when in Protestant church, when you're young. I guess it's appropriate for most Christian denominations. In the end, you when you're a teenager, you go to some formal education on this religion, and then you kind of are welcomed in the community, so to say. For some process. Let's put it this way.
Oh, okay.
This was, but I can still answer your question because it's so relevant. It's just it takes me back a bit to when I was a teenager till now. And I mentioned this earlier, the Christian texts, they were too cryptic to me. And when you start having to interpret things, it becomes a bit fishy for me. And, particularly, I don't know, maybe particularly, but, I'll stick to Christianity here now. There's a lot of interpretation going on. You can have one verse and 10 opinions about what that means, from the literal, where somebody says, yeah, you have to take it literal, to no, it means, this. So, and I found, other than New Testament and where it's straightforward talk and text, it didn't give me, it didn't give me a satisfying answer, so to say. That's why when I was in high school and I took physical science, and that's where this exploration started, all the way to where I'm now formulating this opinion on consciousness. So how did this change? This exploration, I was seeking the explanation that made the most sense for me, respectively, that I could understand, that you can kind of also test. So I'm quite Buddhist flavored. Would I call myself a Buddhist? I would argue then what does it mean? Because if you were Buddhist, then you would, I don't know, take the vow, so to say, on the whole Buddhist thing, so to say. I would argue that's more my train of thought and belief than Christianity. I don't believe in a creator God. Just doesn't make any logical sense for me, coming out of my perspective. So it's the seeking truth, like Justin tells kids to be open, be curious and learn and see what makes sense. And I found anyway, I've learned to build the bridges across the religions. Like if I taught pure consciousness from a Buddhist perspective, he could translate that as the kingdom of God. Seems to be to me the same, So I've learned to make the connections, and the differences between Buddhism and Hinduism in some regards are nuances, for to say, particularly on this, scholars now will slap me silly. It's of course wrong, but particular examples like on rebirth or reincarnation, there's subtle differences. And Buddha anyway was a Hindu, or came out of this structure, so to say, just like Jesus came out of the Jewish tradition, or lived in the Jewish tradition. So, yeah, I mean, it's a journey, and I must tell you, with I was already, and I literally bought Buddhist scriptures and from scholars, and I was also highly influenced by certain popular ones like Thich Nhat Hanh, or I forget the US lady now by chance. And I just swallowed things up, and I've kind of put it in place, because it's really helpful and practical stuff to live your life by. And this logo in the background here with what other finger, this finger, not this finger, where this finger, not doing this. There we go. No, it doesn't work. So this kappa momentum is probably one of the insights. Life is only to be found in the moment. It's not in the past, and it's not in the future. You can only find life and spend life in the now. And it sounds, if you think about it, like, that's right. And if you fully understand it and it sinks in and you would live by it, that would change your life dramatically. We usually don't. I don't, because you get stuck in your human experience, I must say, and then you follow your natural, so to say, human desires. But truly, life is only found there. And if you think about it, for yourself or others, if you observe them, you can look at how much are you attached to things of the past. Usually old people start telling the stories of, when I was a kid, and so forth, respectively. You may be like, stuck there even as a young adult or adult, or you're afraid of the future. It's also a tendency, worried about the future, what the future will bring, when actually this life is only just in this moment, and or how people are not present in the moment. They meet you, but they're actually distracted, and they have sorrows on their mind, or work, or kids, or obligations, or debt, or whatever, whatever you want to pick on your experience. So, yeah, I was a bit of a crisscross, but that's how it changed me. And it's not a journey that's done. I want to say, with our son having died, that's one that shakes you up a little bit, to say the least.
That'll definitely break your worldview,
Yeah, break it or make it strong. Because then I had to go down again, and it's like I said, on the human experience, it's just I can't make it any better for myself on the human experience. It just sucks, to say a nice word. It doesn't change anything to have that loss. On the human experience, it's just utterly ridiculous loss.
Mhm.
And then you can go and say, okay, does it help a little bit if you go on the spiritual level? And then it does do some, and it does bring
Mhm.
some clarity. At the same time, like the Christian view would be, I will meet him again in heaven, so to say, and then we're reunited, and then you have to have just patience till you're dead or till I'm dead, and then I would meet him again. Uh, which I, in a sense, that if I would translate on the Buddhist perspective, that's just like, okay, if I can connect back to the consciousness, then I have more direct connection to him again, which would be the same, just said differently in my view. And from a Buddhist perspective, yeah, he probably has reincarnated somewhere, because death was fairly traumatic, he fell off a cliff in a way. So that's not easy for this consciousness to handle, I think. And then if I say he has reincarnated, who knows where and how close and so forth. And it's then still you have this loss, because it's not going to be, he's not going to reincarnate as a son of mine again, because we're not going to have another child. So, it still remains that. So the reason I bring this up, it's just, I think it's a normal story of life that you both also have in some regards, and each one in their own pace. Or not. It depends on how deep you look at life. I've when I've taken a decision, for example, to quit that job, another person takes high risk, but had looked at me back then and say, "What the heck are you doing?" Because I was vice president in the bank. You don't quit. You don't quit that kind of job. And I had my reasons. I won't go into all of them, but it's one of them was also and I had 6 years roughly, that I had at home with my son at my time, more direct. And that was also one of the reasons, I didn't work crazy hours when I was working, so I always paid attention also not to overwork, but still, that's a choice that I had taken, also very, in that sense, consciously, I didn't, it wasn't a stupid decision in terms of financial, because we have some financial stability. So to step out of this hamster wheel, so to say, it was a very much conscious decision. And it wouldn't have come if I would have not had this level of awareness of, okay, there's more to life than just the work.
Was it an existential reason for you to leave your bank job, like in the sense of, existentialism? Yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with what it is, but to our viewers who aren't. So it's like essentially like there's an element of you that is threatened to die, so to speak. And what you do is you try to basically do whatever it is possible in order to sustain that life. So say, for example, it's your passion, like you feel like there's something inside of you that is dying and you know what's causing it. Was it existentialism that caused you to do that? Or was there like some other driving force to cause you to quit your job? I know you mentioned there was like particular reasons, but I'm just wondering if there was like an ultimate reason.
Well, the way you describe it, I would have to get into more what existentialism is, but the way you describe it, maybe it was one of the core reasons. It was just, I have my capabilities as what I've learned in my profession, in terms of what I do, and I wasn't getting anywhere more. And I guess in the sense of that, I may have had this, what you call inside of me, this calling for. This cannot be it kind of thing. Then maybe yes. I mean, it's I enjoyed my job. I still like these things in terms of and I can talk about this how to build, how to make change, how to lead in the right way, how to apply best practices to a company to make it work. To say some things maybe I don't know if that's too generic, but. So I enjoyed that, but yeah, if you say it like this, maybe some of it was like this, where I didn't need this, and it's in a way it's a luxury, because ultimately why do we work? We need to make money, because we live in the world that's how it functions. You have to have money to make a living, so to say. And I had worked at that point about 20 years, and we had some base, with typical things like a house and so forth, and some savings, and I didn't have to have the job per se that gave me the freedom to take that decision. So then I turned to, okay, I wanted to be independent, do my own thing. And ultimately, as a result, in those 6 years, I spent huge amounts of time on stuff that just interests me. Some of it in the beginning was that I also spent some extra time on the observatory, respectively also on topics that we scratched. One of them being that I always invested our money, respectively, the astrophysics side of things and so forth, but I've kind of quieted it down, over the last 2 or 3 years. But then also world politics, macroeconomics, how do these things function? Also understanding the world also in this perspective, so to say. And if you're in a full-time job, you're not going to come home and spend 4 hours on stuff like this. Like I watched the video yesterday because I was curious, because there's no scientific results. Roger Penrose and Stuart Hambroth. Other people may, and I still watch the movies, but I take the time for this kind of stuff. So
it's what brings you. It's what gives you life.
Yeah, I mean, you have to really challenge yourself. Like I said, you're attached. If you watch closely, you're attached to your desires, and you have to be careful of what you're doing is coming out of a healthy / right direction. Skillful direction is maybe better. And if you I don't know, for some reason end up in a job that you don't like, and you just have to take that job because that's what it is, and you have to because that's somehow where high school, whatever, maybe college or whatever will let you, but you're not happy. You're going to work like this until you're retired. I mean, I've had this Disneyland choice in a way where I could create some freedom, and many people don't realize. Even people with a good living. I had folks at the bank, and mind you, there was one level just between me and the board, and so people just like above me, that are managing directors. They've been with the company for a long time. They have been there sometimes for also a very long time. They for sure should have had enough money, and they weren't able to just say it's enough. How much money do you need? Kind of question.
Oh yeah, I've left better paying jobs. You got to be happy in what you do. I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean that's also what I tell my kids and told my kids. Do what you enjoy, do what your passion, where your passion is, because sometimes you may not have that choice, but that's what I think you should aim for. If you work jobs that you just hate waking up to and going to, you're not gonna be happy. We don't always get the choice. I understand that. I'm also talking out of I don't want to say white privilege, but out of a privileged area, because, and my parents were not rich, mind you, but I made my life for myself in terms of that income and those assets. But still, I live in a country that has the war is closer now, but we don't have any war in Germany, in Europe, at least not on the western side of things, directly western side. So compared to, I don't know, more conflict areas of the world, it's more difficult to, preach the same topics I'm saying now, because if you're struggling, you can focus and you just have to do the kind of
what you have to do. You care about the cosmos when you're worried about getting bombed, right?
Or having to get food, yeah, of course. Then you care. You can still think about, argue. You can still sustain your life better if you understand, on topics that we talked about. I think it's still easier. But ultimately, your worry is not that, and you're just trying to make a living and find food and so forth. So yeah.
What's
so?
Sorry. Go ahead, Turtle.
Oh, I was just going to. My last question here is, so we kind of dabbled a bit about kind of like how cosmic consciousness can kind of be like a lot of these intangibles. Now I'm just curious, like how. So this is my last question. Where does cosmic consciousness fit into practical living, like day-to-day life?
I believe in appreciation of others, because we are connected. And I don't want to go into the territory of necessarily saying, if there's rebirth, then, your next door neighbor may be somebody you've met before, but You can also go. You could go also in that direction. If you just look at in our approach from Thich Hans perspective, if you think about interbeing and how everything's connected, and that's in a way for me cosmic. Okay, it's on the scale here, but I have to bring it down to our level here, because we are connected, and this goes not just on the human side of things, birds, bees, other animals, we need the bees, don't slap a wasp dead, we need them. So I think it's appreciation, appreciating others, appreciating what you have yourself, and finding also the good in things, and appreciating what you have, and it's usually more than you think. If you start making a list of, there's these practices called metta loving kindness. So these practices where you can literally say, I'm thankful for this and I'm thankful for that. I think that's where it manifests, and ultimately in what it says on my logo, you have to understand that life is only in the moment. And by the way, this also includes of being able to make a decision, to have a choice, because the majority of people live on autopilot. That's maybe another category to mention, because having our behaviors and patterns and preferences, we don't take the time to let a pause be there to think, so to say, and not be overwhelmed by emotional overreactions or reactions for that matter. So I think this cosmos consciousness, to then be aware of this and lead a skillful life, would be my take on that, reflecting into on our lives, because it's connected. You can try to live by yourself, but it's we're social beings, and respectively, other than other sentient beings or even animals, you still need the planet. We're part of the planet. We go into the planet. Become topsoil, like Sadhguru, if you've ever been. He always said, end up being topsoil. You can't live without the environment, without the other people. So I think that's where I would take that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, man.
All right, I got a couple questions for you, and then we're going to move into a lightning round before we wrap up, okay?
Sure.
So, what kind of advice would you give anyone starting out in your profession? If you could help an entrepreneur or anyone that wanted to get into consulting, what would be one piece of advice?
Best practices comes to my mind. So there's, in any industry, you usually have best practices being available. So go ahead and educate yourself on those. And I could name some, but now it's not relevant for everybody. On the IT side, if you do IT services, there's a standard called ITIL, which has the cookbook on how to do IT service management. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I would say educate yourself, grow. There used to be an NBC slogan called "Never Stop Learning." I like that. So if you're that, don't stop learning. Things really change, the industry changes, or your area of expertise changes. I was going to say, read the manual. So this is on the level of best practice. So if there is, whatever industry you're in, and I'm being generic here, but for a good reason, be the best of what that area delivers. And also maybe look like left and right on those areas, and have some, not just depth, but also, width, so to say. It's you don't know. Also, you don't have to know everything. I think times nowadays is also you look it up. Information is available. Yeah, information is available, and it's different than it used to be. If it's an entrepreneur, I would say look at what industries are there that are interesting nowadays, and you have an opinion about that. On the crypto side of things, I would say there's not many people understand crypto really well. The whole it's actually a huge need for developers on the crypto side of things. If you can develop decentralized applications, you will be hired. Pretty sure. You have topics that you can clearly read, like environment and so forth, or things that are relevant for the current environment, artificial intelligence, if you can go in this area, and so forth. But it could also be just understanding what your passion is. I think you can be a quite happy carpenter and still be in a field of work that actually is quite relevant, because wood grows. It's renewable, and so if you work with wood, you're actually in a job that's ecological, and if that's your passion, then go for it.
Thank you for that. I'm going to start with some lightning questions.
You have 5 minutes, by the way.
All right, good. If
No,
you could
no,
live
on the-
any. Oh, I got you. Yes, sir. I'm familiar. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Probably Texas, if I could shift everybody here or there.
If you could have coffee with any historical figure, who would it be with?
Wow. Well, there's many. I would, for the fun of it, and he's still alive. Roger Penrose actually will turn 91 or 2 on Tuesday. I think wouldn't mind having a chat with him.
Be a hell of a conversation. What star sign are you?
Pisces.
Pisces. All right. Are you an introvert or an outrovert? Extrovert, rather.
What do you think?
I would say you're an extrovert. You think?
I'd say introvert.
Really?
Yeah, I think I'm actually an introvert by nature, but I've learned to be extrovert.
Yeah, because I'm the exact same way.
Yeah.
All right. What do you think the world is going to look like in 5 years?
Can you be specific?
Let's say technology. What do you think technological advancement do you think is just over the horizon?
I think we're just in the middle of the next industrial revolution, in terms of artificial intelligence, in terms of you do 3D printing, which is, by the way, a topic we should definitely discuss. This aspect of being able to scan something 3D and then print. That's massive.
For sure, I'll show you something.
That's massive. So that's a part of the industrial revolution.
No.
You don't have it.
Okay. All right. I was trying to find something I scanned that was tiny, or that was large. So this is a person. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, I saw it on your Instagram, I think, or something similar to that. Yeah. So that's the 3D printing is massive. So you have that. You have artificial intelligence. I've just signed up, and forgive me, I don't know the name. It's this artificial intelligence, I'll call it computer, that you can type in, paint me a picture in this and this style with an elephant on the moon. And this AI will create this.
Yeah, it's called Crayon. Craiyan. Yep. That's very interesting. I'll show
I don't think that's the one that I signed up to, but it's something like that. There might be more than one, because you have to actually, if I can find it real quick, it's called OpenAI, actually. Anyway, I think it's OpenAI, and they have so AI is a big topic. So the world will change in that regard. I think we'll have huge changes in terms of things moving into clusters of countries and regions again. This shift backwards from from this globalization back to nationalization, or clusters of like US and so forth. And you can see this clearly now. So that will be a change, and I think we will see this struggle for who's the empire. US is currently still the world empire, and you have China not actually pressing for it, just becoming it just naturally, so to say, by the way they behave, because they don't show the same type of behavior than the US has over the last 50 years. So in terms of being aggressive and going out and making their reach felt.
I really appreciate you being on and giving us some of your insights. We got about a minute here left Turtle, do you want to have any final thoughts?
No, man, I have a lot to chew on, but I truly appreciate the conversation with you, Andreas.
Yes, thanks for having me on, because I know this thing's going to wrap up in about 90 seconds. So enjoyed the talking and being listened to. We can definitely do one again if you would like.
Definitely.
I'll let you know how my channels will go and if I can create content. And enjoyed the conversation, the good questions, and I hope your viewers enjoyed.